Fact 1. The Galaxy in Flames. Welcome to the Koprulu Sector, a distant region of space where three mighty species clash in an endless struggle for survival, dominance, and transcendence. In the heart of this brutal conflict lies some of the richest sci-fi lore ever crafted. This is Starcraft, a universe of betrayal, prophecy, ancient alien empires, and forgotten terrors. In today's video, we'll journey through 10 of the most fascinating and lesser-known lore facts from the Starcraft universe. So sit back, suit up, and get ready for a deep dive into the myths, secrets, and shadows of the Koprulu Sector. Fact 2. The Xel'Naga, architects of creation and chaos. Long before Terrans, Zerg, or Protoss ever took to the stars, there existed a godlike race known as the Xel'Naga. Their purpose? To guide the evolution of life throughout the universe. They sought to cultivate two essential traits in species: purity of form and purity of essence. To achieve this, they seeded countless worlds, subtly manipulating the development of entire civilizations. The Protoss were their greatest success in achieving purity of form, powerful, intelligent, and bound by a deep psychic connection. Meanwhile, the Zerg, a horrific swarm from the planet Xerus, were the embodiment of purity of essence, endlessly adaptable and biologically perfect. But the Xel'Naga's grand design ultimately led to their downfall. The Zerg turned on their creators, assimilating them into the swarm and nearly wiping them out. What began as a cosmic experiment became a galactic nightmare. The irony? The Xel'Naga, in their quest for perfection, birthed the very chaos they sought to master. Fact 3. The true origin of the Terrans. Unlike the Zerg and Protoss, the Terrans weren't native to the Koprulu Sector. In fact, their ancestors were political dissidents, criminals, and undesirables exiled from Earth in the 23rd century. These convicts were placed into cryogenic stasis aboard automated prison ships and launched into deep space. But something went horribly wrong. The ships malfunctioned and crash-landed on distant worlds. Isolated and forgotten, these survivors built new civilizations on planets like Tarsones, Umoja, and Moria. Over generations, they evolved into fierce, pragmatic colonists, forced to adapt without support from Earth. Their technology advanced in unpredictable ways, and eventually they formed powerful factions: the Confederacy, the Kelmorian Combine, and the Umojan Protectorate. The Terrans of Starcraft aren't just space marines. They're the descendants of the outcasts of Earth, forging a brutal destiny in an unforgiving corner of the galaxy. Fact 4. Sarah Kerrigan, the tragic Queen of Blades. Sarah Kerrigan began as a powerful Terran ghost, a psychic assassin with deadly precision. Gifted with immense psionic potential, she was taken and trained from a young age by the Terran Confederacy. But her fate changed forever during the Brood War. Abandoned by Arcturus Mengsk on the Zerg-infested world of Tarsones, she was captured and infested by the Zerg Overmind. But rather than become a mindless slave, Kerrigan retained her free will. She evolved into the Queen of Blades, a terrifying fusion of Terran and Zerg, unmatched in power. Over the years, Kerrigan waged war on her former allies and enemies alike, manipulating the swarm and destroying anyone who stood in her path. Yet, beneath the layers of rage and mutation, traces of her humanity remained. Her story is one of pain, transformation, and ultimate redemption, culminating in a final confrontation with Amon, the last of the ancient Xel'Naga. In the end, Kerrigan didn't just survive the chaos. She became something far greater. Fact 5. Amon, the fallen Xel'Naga. Amon is the shadow behind the curtain, the dark god of the Starcraft universe. A rogue Xel'Naga, he defied his brethren's ideals, seeking to reshape the universe not through guidance, but domination. Disgusted by the concept of free will, Amon aimed to merge the purity of form and essence into a singular, obedient race under his control. He manipulated the Zerg into attacking the Protoss, orchestrated the downfall of civilizations, and created the hybrid monstrous fusions of Protoss and Zerg, capable of unimaginable destruction. Amon's influence stretched across eons, whispering through ancient texts, corrupting minds, and bending entire species to his will. Even in death, he lingered in the void, pulling strings from beyond reality. Defeating Amon required an alliance of all three races, Terran, Zerg, and Protoss, to stand together against the very being that had shaped their destinies. His defeat marked the end of an era, but the scars of his ambition remain. Fact 6. The Dark Templar and the Sundering. The Protoss were once united under the Khala, a psionic connection that bound every individual to the collective will of their species. But not all agreed with this path. A group of Protoss, later known as the Dark Templar, rejected the Khala, valuing individuality and freedom. This ideological rift led to the Sundering, a brutal civil war that shattered their unity. The Dark Templar were exiled to the shadowy world of Shakuras, where they developed new ways of life and warfare, embracing stealth and psionic disruption. They were considered heretics by the Khalai, but when the Protoss homeworld of Ire fell to the Zerg, it was the Dark Templar who helped their brethren survive. Eventually, the two factions reconciled, combining their strengths to stand against greater threats. The story of the Dark Templar isn't just about war. It's about resistance to conformity, the courage to walk a different path, and the eventual healing of a fractured people. Fact 7. Ghosts and Project Shadowblade. Terran ghosts are more than elite snipers or cloaked assassins. They are the product of horrifying genetic manipulation and psychological conditioning. From a young age, children with high psionic potential are taken by the Terran government, often without consent, and trained under the brutal ghost program. But there's a darker layer still, Project Shadowblade. This secretive initiative aimed to push ghost abilities far beyond natural limits, using neural reconditioning, memory wipes, and psychic dampeners. Many test subjects didn't survive. The ones who did became weapons, hollow, obedient, and deadly. Ghosts like Novaterra began to question their role, uncovering the lies behind their creation. The Terran Dominion's use of ghosts is a reminder that in Starcraft, war isn't just fought with guns and armies. It's waged in the mind, often at the cost of the soul. Fact 8. The Infested Terrans, victims of the swarm. Infested Terrans are one of the most horrifying aspects of the Zerg swarm. Once human, they've been biologically corrupted, their bodies twisted by the Zerg virus. The Overmind and later Kerrigan used infestation not only as a weapon, but as psychological warfare, turning allies into monstrosities. What makes infestation so terrifying isn't just the transformation, but the mind behind it. Some retain fragments of who they were, trapped inside a shell they no longer control. Others become fanatical tools of the swarm. The most tragic example? Stukov, a former admiral infected by the Zerg, killed, resurrected, and ultimately freed. Yet the scars never faded. Infested Terrans show that the line between species, between life and death, is terrifyingly thin in Starcraft, and that sometimes the enemy is what you become. Fact 9. The Purifiers, AI, Memory, and Identity. The Protoss once created a race of synthetic warriors known as the Purifiers, powerful machines built in the image of their creators, each one embedded with the consciousness of a real Protoss warrior. But when the Purifiers began to question their orders, fearing they were being used and discarded, the Protoss turned on them. A war broke out, and the Purifiers were decommissioned and sealed away. Centuries later, during the war against Amon, the Purifiers were reawakened. This time, they weren't just weapons. They demanded autonomy, respect, and a chance to choose their own future. The story of the Purifiers is a philosophical one, exploring what it means to be alive, to have memories, and to seek purpose when your identity was engineered. In a universe full of ancient prophecies and alien gods, the Purifiers are a testament to the power of self-awareness and redemption. Fact 10. The end of the cycle, legacy of the void. At the heart of Starcraft's final chapter lies an ancient truth, that all life in the galaxy has been manipulated by forces beyond comprehension. Amon's rise and the rise of hybrid horrors marked the culmination of an age-old cycle of control. But for the first time in millennia, the cycle was broken. In Legacy of the Void, Artanis, Kerrigan, and Raynor forged an uneasy alliance to stop the unraveling of reality itself. The war reached into the void, a dimension beyond life, where Amon's soul resided. Kerrigan ascended, merging with Xel'Naga essence to face him as an equal. In her final act, she sacrificed everything to destroy Amon once and for all. Peace returned to the Koprulu Sector, but at a cost. The cycle ended not through domination, but through unity, sacrifice, and the willingness to change. And with that, the Starcraft saga became more than just a story of war. It became a myth of hope in the face of oblivion. Fact 11. The Overmind's secret purpose. The Overmind, the central consciousness of the Zerg swarm, was believed to be a force of pure destruction, commanding endless legions of Zerg to consume and evolve. But hidden beneath its monstrous will was a secret purpose, a purpose not its own. The Overmind was created by the Xel'Naga, but after they were slain by the Zerg, it fell under the influence of Amon. The Dark God implanted a command into the Overmind's very essence, to destroy the Protoss and bring about the rise of the hybrid. Yet deep within its vast intelligence, the Overmind yearned to break free. It began to plant seeds of rebellion, one of them being the deliberate infestation of Sarah Kerrigan. The Overmind foresaw her potential as a wildcard, a being who could eventually stand against Amon. What seemed like a tactical move was actually a final, desperate act of defiance. The Overmind was not simply a tyrant. It was a prisoner, and in its death, it hoped for freedom, not for itself, but for the galaxy. Fact 12. The tragedy of Phoenix. Phoenix was one of the greatest warriors in Protoss history, brave, loyal, and fiercely honorable. During the Zerg invasion of Ire, Phoenix was mortally wounded, but rather than let him die, the Protoss preserved his consciousness in a Dragoon, a walking war machine housing fallen heroes. Phoenix returned to battle, changed in body but not in spirit. He fought alongside Jim Raynor and even trusted Kerrigan, until she betrayed and killed him during the Brood War. His death was more than personal, it was symbolic, a symbol of Kerrigan's ruthless ambition and the cost of trusting anyone in a galaxy at war. Phoenix's legacy would live on, however, not only as a martyr, but as a reminder that even the strongest can fall, and that loyalty in the Starcraft universe often leads to heartbreak. Fact 13. The UED, Earth's Forgotten Empire. When Earth finally returned to the Koprulu Sector, it did so under the banner of the United Earth Directorate, a cold, authoritarian regime that sought to conquer the sector in the name of order and control. The UED arrived with overwhelming force, stunning the local powers and even managing to subjugate the Zerg by seizing control of the Overmind. But their arrogance became their downfall. The UED underestimated the chaos of the sector and the cunning of Kerrigan. She united the remnants of the Protoss and Terran forces to destroy the Overmind and cut the UED off from Earth. Isolated and hunted, the UED's forces were annihilated. The Directorate's incursion is a chilling reminder that even the might of Earth, in its full military glory, was no match for the ancient forces and alliances that shaped the Koprulu Sector. In the end, the UED wasn't a savior, it was just another empire swallowed by the stars. Fact 14. The Lost Protoss Tribes. The Protoss are often seen as a singular, monolithic species, but in truth, they were once divided into numerous tribes, each with unique cultures, philosophies, and histories. While most joined the conclave and adopted the Kala, some remained hidden or forgotten. The Tal'Darim, for example, embraced chaos and strength, becoming ruthless servants of Amon. Others, like the Nerazim or Dark Templar, rejected the Kala entirely. And some tribes, like the Shalak or Ariga, simply vanished during the early days of Protoss unification. These forgotten tribes are echoes of a complex past, hinting at an even deeper and more fragmented Protoss history than the games reveal. What wisdom, technology, or heresies were lost with them, we may never know. But one thing is clear: the Protoss are not just warriors or mystics, they are a fractured civilization trying to reclaim its soul. Fact 15. The Secrets of Xeris, Birthplace of the Zerg. Xeris, the primordial world where the Zerg were born, is a living nightmare, a place of constant evolution, where survival demands mutation and adaptation at every moment. The Zerg were not always a hive mind. Originally, they were individual, primal creatures, each evolving independently. It was the arrival of the Xel'Naga and the creation of the Overmind that unified them into a single swarm. But after the Overmind's death, Kerrigan returned to Xeris to claim the power of the primal Zerg, consuming the essence of ancient Zerg warlords like Zervan to unlock her ultimate potential. On Xeris, evolution is not just science, it's religion, war, and destiny all rolled into one. The primal Zerg teach us that even the most advanced monsters in the galaxy still have roots, and those roots are ancient, brutal, and hungry. Fact 16. The Tal'Darim, Zealots of Death and Ascension. The Tal'Darim are Protoss in body, but not in spirit. They rejected the Kala thousands of years ago and instead embraced the worship of Amon. Under his rule, they followed the path of ascension, a brutal hierarchy where advancement comes only through killing those above you. Led by High Lord Alarak, a ruthless and cunning warrior, the Tal'Darim eventually turned on Amon after realizing they were mere pawns in his grand design. Alarak's rise to power was bloody and bold, and his rebellion marked a turning point in the Tal'Darim's story. No longer servants of a dead god, they now seek to forge their own future. But their culture remains steeped in violence, strength, and pride. The Tal'Darim remind us that freedom often comes at the edge of a blade, and that even zealots can change. Fact 17. Jim Raynor, Rebel with a Cause. Jim Raynor started as a lawman on a dusty frontier world, but over time, he became one of the most important figures in the galaxy. A freedom fighter, a rogue commander, and an unlikely hero, Raynor's story is deeply personal. He fought against tyranny in the Terran Confederacy, stood up to Arcturus Mengsk's lies, and never stopped believing in Sarah Kerrigan's humanity, even after she became the Queen of Blades. His leadership of Raynor's Raiders wasn't about conquest, but principle. He fought for the right to choose, for those forgotten by the system, and for a better future. Raynor's strength wasn't in overwhelming firepower, but in unshakable resolve. He's the moral backbone of the Starcraft saga. A man who lost everything and still chose to fight for something. Fact 18. Zeratul, Prophet in the Shadows. Zeratul was a Dark Templar, a master of stealth and a seeker of truth. But more than that, he was a prophet, burdened with visions of the future, trying desperately to warn the galaxy of Amon's return. Zeratul uncovered the prophecy of the end times, uniting fragments of knowledge from Zerg, Protoss, and Xel'Naga sources. He sacrificed everything to find the truth, including his standing among his people and, ultimately, his life. In his final moments, he helped awaken Artanis to Amon's corruption, enabling the Protoss to begin the process of reclaiming their legacy. Zeratul's story is one of faith, sacrifice, and unwavering conviction. He walked in the shadows not out of fear, but because the light of truth often lies in the darkest places. Fact 18. Zeratul, Prophet in the Shadows. Zeratul was a Dark Templar, a master of stealth and a seeker of truth. But more than that, he was a prophet, burdened with visions of the future, trying desperately to warn the galaxy of Amon's return. Zeratul uncovered the prophecy of the end times, uniting fragments of knowledge from Zerg, Protoss, and Xel'Naga sources. He sacrificed everything to find the truth, including his standing among his people and, ultimately, his life. In his final moments, he helped awaken Artanis to Amon's corruption, enabling the Protoss to begin the process of reclaiming their legacy. Cyrodiil's story is one of faith, sacrifice, and unwavering conviction. He walked in the shadows not out of fear, but because the light of truth often lies in the darkest places. Fact 19. Hybrid, the unholy children of Amon. Hybrid are the culmination of Amon's vision, terrifying fusions of Zerg essence and Protoss form, designed to be the perfect soldiers of his new order. They possess immense psionic power, resilience, and an eerie, soulless intelligence. Created in hidden laboratories and bred in stasis chambers, hybrid were the ultimate secret weapon. They speak with Amon's voice, carry out his will, and are nearly unstoppable on the battlefield. Facing a single hybrid is a deadly challenge. Facing an army of them is a nightmare. The hybrid represent the darkest possibility of genetic manipulation and the terrifying hubris of the Xel'Naga. They are not a species, they are an abomination, crafted from the stolen futures of two proud races. 20. The final ascension. Kerrigan becomes Xel'Naga. In the final act of Legacy of the Void, Kerrigan sheds her identity as Queen of Blades and embraces a new destiny, to ascend and become Xel'Naga. It was not a reward but a choice. A choice to sacrifice her mortal self to stand against Amon in the void. Kerrigan merges with the essence left behind by Auros, the last benevolent Xel'Naga, transforming into a being of immense power and grace. Her battle with Amon is not just physical, but cosmic, a clash of ideologies, of control versus freedom, of creation versus destruction. And when the dust settles, Kerrigan is gone, or perhaps, she's become something greater. Her fate is left open, hinted only by a quiet scene with Raynor after the war. Did she survive as a goddess, or as a memory? Either way, Kerrigan's final act transcended her origins, from human to weapon to queen to savior. Fact 21. Tosh and Project Shadowblade's fallout. Gabriel Tosh, mercenary, specter, and psychic rebel. He's one of the most enigmatic characters in Starcraft 2, and his backstory is closely tied to the darkest corners of Terran science. Tosh was part of Project Shadowblade, a breakaway program from the Ghost Initiative that sought to create more powerful, less controllable psychic operatives called Spectres. Unlike ghosts, Spectres weren't just conditioned, they were enhanced using a rare alien substance called terrazine. The drug unlocked vast psionic potential but came at the cost of sanity. Tosh believed the Spectres could free themselves from Terran oppression. Dominion propaganda painted them as unstable and dangerous. In truth, both were right. The Spectres were unpredictable, powerful, and traumatized. Tosh's quest to liberate them reveals a grim truth. In the Starcraft universe, even those fighting for freedom are often shaped by cruelty and chaos. And sometimes you have to choose between power and control or freedom and madness. Fact 22. The fall of Tarsones, Mengsk's betrayal. The fall of Tarsones wasn't just a military defeat. It was a turning point in Starcraft history. Arcturus Mengsk, once a rebel leader and freedom fighter, orchestrated the destruction of the capital of the Terran Confederacy by luring the Zerg onto the planet using psi emitters. These devices amplified psychic signals to attract the swarm. Mengsk deployed them in secret, allowing the Zerg to tear through Tarsones' defenses. He knew the cost, millions of innocent lives, including his own ally Sarah Kerrigan, who was left behind. The betrayal transformed Mengsk into a tyrant, Kerrigan into a monster, and Raynor into a lifelong enemy of the Dominion. Tarsones was more than a tragedy. It was a ritual of fire that birthed a new era of vengeance, war, and unending consequences. The echoes of that betrayal rippled across every game that followed. Fact 23. The Mobius Foundation, science or subversion. The Mobius Foundation appeared to be a neutral scientific organization dedicated to researching Protoss and Xel'Naga artifacts. But behind its pristine image was a sinister agenda. Secretly funded and directed by Nerid, a servant of Amon, Mobius was instrumental in collecting the components needed to resurrect the hybrid and restore Amon's power. Dr. Emil Nerid himself was a shape-shifting being who served multiple roles across the campaign, manipulating the Terran factions and steering them toward disaster. What made Mobius dangerous wasn't just its knowledge, it was its subtlety. It moved through politics, science, and commerce without detection. It used the truth as a weapon, never needing to fire a single shot. Mobius reminds us that in the Starcraft universe, sometimes the most powerful weapon is information, and those who control it shape the fate of the stars. Fact 24. The Rise and Fall of Arcturus Mengsk. Arcturus Mengsk began as a hero, a brilliant orator, a strategist, a revolutionary. He led the Sons of Korhal against the Confederacy, claiming to fight for justice and freedom. But power, once seized, transformed him. After destroying Tarsones and seizing the Dominion, Mengsk became the very thing he fought against: a tyrant. He silenced dissent, controlled the media, and hunted those who knew the truth. Even his own son, Valerian, opposed him. Mengsk's greatest enemy wasn't Raynor or the Zerg. It was his own hubris. His final moment came when Kerrigan, the very weapon he had unleashed, stormed his palace. As the walls collapsed and the swarm tore through his defenses, Mengsk faced the ultimate reckoning. His life ended in fire, consumed by the monster he helped create. A brilliant man brought low not by weakness, but by ambition without empathy. Fact 25. The Protoss Conclave, a legacy of pride and downfall. Before the fall of Ire, the Protoss were ruled by the Conclave, a rigid caste system governed by ancient tradition and absolute control. The Conclave enforced the Khala with religious fervor, exiled the Dark Templar, and resisted all change. Their pride in Protoss superiority blinded them to the growing threats around them, particularly the Zerg. When Ire was invaded, the Conclave refused to accept help from the Nerazim and even ordered the execution of Cyrodiil for disobedience. In the end, their inability to adapt led to their collapse. The fall of the Conclave was not just a political event, it was a cultural awakening. For the Protoss to survive, they had to evolve, to let go of millennia of dogma and unite with their exiled kin. The Conclave serves as a cautionary tale, that even the most advanced civilizations can perish if they refuse to grow. Fact 26. Samir Duran, the man who wasn't. Samir Duran is perhaps the most mysterious character in Starcraft lore. Appearing in Brood War as a Confederate officer turned Kerrigan loyalist, Duran was always one step ahead of everyone, switching allegiances, manipulating events, and building an army of hybrid in secret. But Duran was never human. His true identity was revealed to be Emil Nerid, a shape-shifting servant of Amon who had lived for centuries, possibly longer. He infiltrated human governments, Protoss enclaves, and even Kerrigan's inner circle, always with the same goal: preparing for the return of the Dark One. His appearance in a secret mission during Brood War reveals his labs full of hybrid monsters, centuries ahead of their time. Duran represents the invisible hand, a master manipulator whose true allegiance was never to a side, but to the end of all things. His existence blurs the line between man, myth, and cosmic horror. Fact 27. The Forgotten Terran Colonies. The Terran Confederacy and later the Dominion controlled vast swaths of space, but not all Terran worlds were accounted for. In the outer rims of the Koprulu Sector lie colonies that were abandoned during the Zerg invasions, cut off from supply lines, and left to survive on their own. Some fell into ruin, others devolved into warlord states, and a few adapted in radical ways, developing unique tech, ideologies, and cultures. While the games focus on central factions, the Starcraft novels and expanded lore hint at entire Terran societies that never reintegrated. What ideologies emerged in the vacuum of central power? What happens when isolated humans face the Zerg without support or psychic defense? These forgotten colonies are a narrative goldmine, stories waiting to be told, of survival, madness, or rediscovery. Fact 28. The Psionic Matrix, power of the Protoss. The Protoss communicate and channel their power through a vast network called the Psionic Matrix, an invisible web of energy that connects their minds. Powered by the Cateran crystals and amplified by the Khala, the Matrix enhances their coordination and allows their cities, weapons, and even thoughts to function in perfect harmony. But this power comes at a cost. If the matrix is disrupted, Protoss unity collapses. The Zerg Overmind exploited this during the invasion of Aiur, sending Zerg broods to sever psychic relay points and sow chaos. Later, Amon used the matrix itself to corrupt Protoss through the Kala, forcing the survivors to cut their nerve cords to free themselves. The psionic matrix is not just a tool, it's the soul of Protoss civilization. And when it falters, everything they are threatens to fall apart. Fact 29. The End War, a threefold prophecy fulfilled. The End War wasn't just a final battle. It was the culmination of an ancient prophecy. The Xel'Naga foretold a time when three would rise: a purity of form, a purity of essence, and a new force to bring balance. For millennia, this was believed to be myth. But when Artanis, Kerrigan, and Raynor joined forces, the prophecy was fulfilled in the most unexpected way. Protoss, Zerg, and Terran, once mortal enemies, became the last hope of the galaxy. The war raged across worlds, realms, and even the void itself. When Kerrigan ascended and destroyed Amon, the cycle was broken. The prophecy of the end was not about destruction, it was about unity. And in the end, the legacy of war became the promise of peace. Fact 30. Nova, the ghost that haunted the Dominion. November Nova Terra is the most iconic ghost operative in Terran history. A psychic assassin who became a living weapon. Born into a wealthy family on Tersonis, Nova's life was shattered when a rebel uprising led to her family's massacre. Traumatized and dangerously unstable, she fled and was captured by the Dominion. But instead of punishment, she was given purpose. Nova was reprogrammed, conditioned, and molded into a perfect operative, detached, lethal, and loyal. But ghosts never stay buried. In time, Nova began to uncover the truth of her past and the lies of her commanders. Her story, explored in Starcraft, Ghost and later Nova Covert Ops, shows a character torn between identity and duty. Nova wasn't just a soldier. She was a symbol of how the Dominion treated its most valuable assets. As tools, not people. And like every tool, Nova learned how to cut back. Fact 31. The truth behind the Kala, unity or control. The Kala was once seen as the ultimate evolution of Protoss society, a psychic link that united all minds in harmony. But it was also a cage. Instituted after the Aeon of Strife, the Kala ended millennia of civil war by linking every Protoss through shared thought and emotion. It eliminated crime, dissent, and deception, but also individuality. Those who refused were branded heretics, like the Dark Templar who rejected the Kala and were exiled. For centuries, the Protoss believed the Kala was sacred. But during Amon's invasion, he used it to control them, corrupting their thoughts through the very nerve cords they once revered. Only by severing themselves from the Kala could they reclaim free will. The truth is haunting. The Kala wasn't just their strength. It was also their greatest vulnerability. Fact 32. Aiur, cradle of the Protoss, tomb of their pride. Aiur, the Protoss homeworld, is more than a planet. It's a sacred symbol. Lush with energy and beauty, Aiur was where the Protoss first made contact with the Xel'Naga. It was where their society blossomed, where the Kala was born, and where the Conclave reigned. But it was also where their pride blinded them. When the Zerg invaded, the Protoss refused outside help and believed their superior technology would prevail. Didn't. Aiur fell. The survivors were forced to flee to the Dark Templar world of Shakuras, swallowing generations of hatred for the sake of survival. Aiur became a ghost world, crawling with Zerg, echoing with memories. Even when they returned, the scars ran deep. Aiur teaches one of Starcraft's most enduring lessons, that even the mightiest fall when pride overtakes wisdom. Fact 33. Ulrezij, the 7-in-1. Deep in Protoss lore lies a being few remember. Ulrezij, a fusion of 7 rogue Dark Templar who combined their minds and powers into a single terrifying entity. Driven by hatred for the Kala and everything it stood for, Ulrezij waged a hidden war against Protoss unity, seeking to reignite ancient divisions. His presence was most felt in the Dark Templar Saga, a novel trilogy exploring Nerazim society and internal Protoss conflicts. Ulrezij's power was immense, capable of bending shadows, corrupting machines, and defying conventional psionics. He was the dark mirror of the Kala. Multiple minds united not by harmony, but vengeance. His fate remains unresolved, making him one of Starcraft's most chilling loose ends. He is a reminder that sometimes the greatest threats come not from enemies but from within. Fact 34. The Cerberus Project, a Zerg enhanced by Terrans. Terrans manipulating Zerg is nothing new, but the Cerberus Project took it to terrifying extremes. In Starcraft 2, Nova Covert Ops, Cerberus was a secret initiative to enhance Zerg strains with neural inhibitors, control chips, and cybernetic upgrades. These weren't just tamed Zerg, they were re-engineered into weapons capable of following orders like soldiers. Think of them as biological tanks, loyalty bred by science. It was a dark fusion of Terran ingenuity and Zerg biology. But as always, control is an illusion. Cerberus Zerg began to resist their programming, and the project eventually collapsed. The lesson? The more you try to control the swarm, the more it evolves. Cerberus wasn't the first to weaponize Zerg, and it won't be the last. But each time it ends the same way, in blood. Fact 35. The Xel'Naga's original sin. The Xel'Naga were supposed to be the shepherds of life, godlike beings who seeded the stars with creation. But their story is one of hubris, betrayal, and failure. In their quest to create a species with both purity of form and essence, they interfered with natural evolution, elevating the Protoss and Zerg before either was ready. The Protoss rebelled. The Zerg devoured them. Amon, one of their own, turned against the cycle and sought to merge both races into his own image, creating hybrid to end the cycle permanently. The Xel'Naga, blinded by their belief in destiny, became victims of their own arrogance. What they saw as divine order was, in the end, manipulation on a cosmic scale. Their legacy is a ruined galaxy and a war that spans eons. They weren't gods. They were flawed just like their creations. Fact 36. Artanis, the warrior philosopher. High executor. Hierarch. Savior of his people. Artanis isn't just a commander, he's a spiritual and philosophical leader. From the beginning, Artanis questioned Protoss tradition, believing unity between the Kala and Nerazim was possible. During Legacy of the Void, he led the unified Protoss against Amon, forced to make impossible decisions, even cutting the Kala itself from his people. But Artanis was never driven by power. He was driven by purpose, a belief that the Protoss could transcend their past. He wielded both blade and word with equal strength, bringing together fractured ideologies into a new post-Amon future. Artanis is Starcraft's philosopher king, proof that leadership isn't about domination, but compassion guided by strength. He is the bridge between what the Protoss were and what they must become. Fact 37. The annihilation of Chao Sera. Before the Zerg invaded en masse, they appeared quietly, beginning with the small Terran colony world of Chao Sera. The Confederacy, terrified of Zerg spreading, responded with a war crime, orbital bombardment of the entire planet. No trial, no defense, millions dead in an instant. This was the first real encounter between Terrans and the Swarm, and the brutality of the response revealed the desperation and moral bankruptcy of Confederate leadership. It also gave Arcturus Mengsk his first propaganda victory, using footage of the atrocity to recruit supporters to the Sons of Korhal. Chao Sera's destruction set off a domino effect. Raynor's radicalization, Kerrigan's deployment, and eventually the full-scale war between species. It was the match that lit the fire, and it burned the whole sector down. Fact 38. The cancelled Starcraft, Ghost, What We Lost. Starcraft, Ghost was more than a cancelled game. It was a vision of Starcraft through a different lens. Meant to follow Nova on stealth and espionage missions across the Dominion, the game would have revealed secret tech, Black Ops experiments, and glimpses of life outside the battlefield. We were set to explore the shadow world of Ghost conditioning, the Mobius Foundation's early origins, and the rise of rebel factions threatening Mengsk's rule. The gameplay was nearly complete, the world fully realized, but it was cancelled due to shifting development priorities and the rise of World of Warcraft. Ghost was a casualty of success, but remnants remain. Nova's backstory, references in SC2, and whispers of what could have been. Starcraft, Ghost may be gone, but its shadow still lingers. Fact 39. Raynor's Raiders, rebellion forged in guilt. Raynor's Raiders weren't just freedom fighters. They were born from grief, betrayal, and revenge. After Arcturus Mengsk abandoned Kerrigan to the Zerg on Tarsones, Jim Raynor left the Sons of Korhal in disgust. He had already lost his family to the chaos of the Terran frontier. Now he'd lost someone he loved and trusted. What followed was more than rebellion. Raynor formed a crew of outcasts, idealists, and mercenaries willing to fight the Dominion from the shadows. His flagship, the Hyperion, became a symbol of resistance. But Raynor's struggle was never clean. He wrestled with alcoholism, self-doubt, and the trauma of war. His raiders often faced impossible odds, both militarily and morally. The group stood not just for freedom, but for redemption. In the end, Raynor wasn't trying to save the galaxy. He was trying to save himself. Fact 40. Broodmother Zagara, from servant to sovereign. Zagara began as just another broodmother, one of many Zerg leaders bred for obedience and aggression. But her story is one of growth, rebellion, and eventual rulership. After Kerrigan reasserted control over the swarm, Zagara challenged her, believing herself the rightful heir to Zerg supremacy. She lost but survived, and in doing so she evolved. Zagara began to understand Kerrigan's vision and grew beyond raw instinct. Over time, she became a strategist, philosopher, and eventually the swarm's new leader after Kerrigan's ascension. Zagara didn't just inherit the swarm, she earned it. Under her rule, the Zerg changed. No longer a mindless hive, they began to explore purpose beyond destruction. Zagara symbolizes the idea that even the most primal beings can evolve, not just biologically but spiritually. Fact 41. The UED's hidden agenda, Earth's cold hand. When the United Earth Directorate, UED, invaded the Koprulu Sector in Brood War, most saw them as outsiders seeking order. But the truth is far colder. The UED wasn't acting out of noble intent. They viewed the sector and its inhabitants as rogue colonies needing to be reclaimed or destroyed. Their agenda was imperialistic to the core. They sought to control the Zerg through a sidesruptor, to enslave the swarm and use it as a tool of conquest. Their generals, like Dugal and Stukov, represented two conflicting visions: pragmatism versus idealism. In the end, both failed. The UED underestimated the chaos of the sector and the cunning of Kerrigan. Earth's hand reached too far and was burned for it. The UED reminds us that distance doesn't guarantee wisdom, and power without empathy becomes tyranny. Fact 42. The Taldarim, slaves who chose chains. The Taldarim are a sect of Protoss who followed Amon long after others turned against him. But what makes them unique isn't just their devotion. It's that they chose their chains. Living under a brutal system called the Chain of Ascension, the Taldarim believed in strength above all. Leaders were challenged and killed by their inferiors, with power passing through bloodshed. To them, this was purity. Weakness was failure. They embraced Amon not as a god, but as a force that gave them structure. Even after Amon's fall, many continued his ways, struggling with identity and purpose. Alarak, their defiant new leader, began to question everything, and his rise signaled a shift. The Taldarim show how ideology can twist strength into fanaticism, and how freedom is hardest to grasp when you've convinced yourself you're already free. Fact 43. The Leviathan, living warships of the swarm. Zerg Leviathans are massive, living battleships, kilometers long, heavily armored, and bristling with biological weaponry. But they're not just beasts, they're ecosystems. Inside, entire Zerg broods nest, evolve, and deploy. They house cerebrate-like control structures, gestation chambers, and even command thrones for Kerrigan or Zagara. Each Leviathan is an apex organism bred for deep space war, resistant to vacuum, radiation, and psionic attack. And they aren't just mobile, they're alive. They think, feel, and react. Kerrigan's personal Leviathan in Heart of the Swarm wasn't just a base of operations, it was a character. These creatures reflect the core Zerg principle. No machine is more efficient than life itself. The Leviathan proves that the swarm doesn't build its weapons, it grows them. Fact 44. Psi-emitters, tools of control, tragedy, and terror. Psi-emitters are devices that broadcast powerful psionic signals, irresistible to the Zerg. Originally created by the Terran Confederacy, they were meant to lure Zerg to specific targets for containment or destruction. But in Mengsk's hands, they became weapons of genocide. He used one to direct the Zerg to Tarsones, leading to the planet's annihilation. Later, other factions experimented with them for defense, control, or research, always underestimating the chaos they invite. Psi-emitters represent one of the most dangerous tools in the Starcraft universe. Manipulation of the Zerg mind. They don't kill, they summon. And what comes when they activate can never be fully controlled. These devices aren't just tools, they're sirens, calling monsters from the dark. Fact 45. Hybrid children of two horrors. Hybrid are the ultimate expression of Amon's twisted vision, fusions of Protoss psionics and Zerg essence. They were engineered over centuries in hidden labs, combining the precision of the Protoss with the adaptability of the Zerg. The result? Beings that wield both psionic storms and biological regeneration. They don't just kill, they dominate. Each hybrid is a nightmare given form, telepathic and nearly indestructible. What's worse, they aren't mindless. They speak, they plan, and they hate. During Legacy of the Void, entire armies of hybrid emerged from the shadows, revealing how deeply Amon had prepared. They were his children, bred not for conquest, but for extinction. The hybrid represent a fundamental question in Starcraft. What happens when the worst of two species is combined? The answer is horror. Fact 46. Xeris, the Zerg's true homeworld. Long before the Overmind, Broodmothers, or Kerrigan, there was Xeris, the primordial world of the Zerg. A jungle planet teeming with raw evolutionary chaos. Xeris is where the Zerg first emerged. Solitary, feral, and endlessly mutating. It was here that Amon found them, uplifted them, and twisted their nature into a collective swarm. But even after the Overmind's death, the essence of Xeris endured. In Heart of the Swarm, Kerrigan returns to Xeris to evolve, absorbing ancient Zerg essence and awakening primal Zerg tribes, beings untouched by the hive mind, who devour to become. These creatures don't serve, they dominate. Xeris isn't just a planet. It's the origin of hunger, evolution, and conflict. It is the birthplace of instinct given form. Fact 47. Phoenix, hero in flesh and steel. Phoenix was one of the greatest Protoss warriors, a Templar who fought with unmatched honor. After being slain by the Zerg on Ire, his body was recovered and revived within a Dragoon, a cybernetic exoskeleton used for fallen warriors. Many saw this as disgrace. Phoenix embraced it. He continued to fight alongside Raynor and Kerrigan, even when alliances shifted and ideals clashed. He saw Raynor not as an alien, but as a kindred spirit. Eventually, Kerrigan betrayed him, not out of necessity, but ruthlessness. His death became one of the last moral lines Jim Raynor would never forgive her for crossing. In Starcraft 2, a copy of Phoenix's consciousness returns in the Purifier program, not quite the same but close. His legacy endures. In a universe of betrayal, Phoenix stood for loyalty, to honor, to friends, and to a cause greater than himself. Fact 48. The Purifiers, machines who remembered they were warriors. The Purifiers were a Protoss experiment in synthetic consciousness, robotic warriors built to mimic the minds of real Templar. Each Purifier was not just programmed, but imprinted with the personality and memories of an actual Protoss, stored in a preserved neural matrix. At first, they were seen as tools. Then they started thinking for themselves. Fearing rebellion, the Conclave shut them down and sealed them away. But the damage was done. The Purifiers had inherited more than tactics. They inherited pride, honor, and pain. In Legacy of the Void, they are reawakened by Artanis, who offers them not control, but partnership. Their leader, a construct named Talander, modeled after Phoenix, becomes a key ally. The Purifiers ask the question, if a machine has a soul, is it still a machine? Fact 49. Kelmorian Combine, the corporate shadow empire. The Kelmorian Combine doesn't launch invasions, it buys them. One of the major Terran powers in the Koprulu Sector, The Combine was built on mining guilds, mercenary contracts, and political exploitation. While the Terran Dominion flaunted authority and military strength, the Kelmorian Combine preferred to operate through economic control. They ran the resource-rich planet of Moria, built black market tech, and even employed ghosts and psionic operatives in total secrecy. They clashed with the Umojan Protectorate and occasionally the Dominion, often over mining rights, like in the Ghost Academy novels. Their military arm, the Kelmorian Reapers, are ruthless and well-paid. In Starcraft's universe, war isn't just fought with weapons. It's fought with contracts, minerals, and influence. The Combine proves that profit can be deadlier than prophecy. Fact 50. The Xel'Naga Keystone Time, broken and rewritten. The Xel'Naga Keystone, central to Legacy of the Void, isn't just a relic. It's a temporal weapon capable of disrupting psionic fields, reversing corruption, and even manipulating time itself. It was created by Xel'Naga to combat Amon, but its full power was never truly understood. During the final assault on Amon, Artanis used the Keystone to sever Amon's control over Protoss mines and eventually expel his essence from the material plane. But here's the twist. The Keystone may have altered reality itself. Some characters speak as if timelines were rewritten. Others act with knowledge they shouldn't possess. The Keystone doesn't just end a battle, it redefines fate. In a universe where prophecy, memory, and mind are so tightly woven, this artifact is the ultimate wild card. It's not just a weapon, it's a reset button.